right. No,
Go ahead.
should we go ahead? Okay, all right. We call the meeting to order. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. To comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629 when the public comment period is opened. And we're in public comment now. Okay, since we don't have any public comment, we'll go ahead and start the agenda. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the December 2nd, 2020 regular meeting.
I move to approve the, is this on? I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Okay, I need
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion approved. The minutes can go on file. Okay, next possible action is review and recommendation on proposed additions at 413 Utah Street relative to the adopted exterior design guidelines for that area. And I understand that the owner might be on the phone, so.
Actually,
No? Okay.
it will be the, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this is on. The light's on. Okay. The architect will be available by phone, but I'll just briefly introduce this.
Okay.
There will be a proposed front porch deck addition and balcony added to the front of the house. It's an existing two-story home that was previously modified. And per the current updated survey for the historic district, this property is considered not contributing to the historic standards because of the modifications that have already been made. And with that, let me call the architect.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, Alan. You're live with the committee.
All right.
You have to put the microphone down by the phone.
You're live with the committee.
Alan, could you mute on your end, your computer?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's better. Yes, I did mute it.
Did you want to do a summary of the proposal?
No, I'll just be here to answer any questions. It's really, well, the real quick summary is that the house has been added onto multiple times over the years. There was one done in the 90s and then another one done to the rear in the late 90s. Sometime, I don't even know when, this house had a sleeping porch that was on the right-hand side of the house. As you face it, typical of those particular houses, and that they filled in the notch. In other words, they added an 8-foot addition all the way across the front of the house sometime in the past. So that did make a dining room and an extension for a little utility room at the far end of the house. But but they were both the dining room was less than 8 feet wide, and so it just didn't work right. So the owners desired to bring that out farther to make it a usable room. And while doing that, they wanted to make a nice porch out there so they could enjoy the view. They got a great view off into the street of Utah, and the whole area there was just an absolutely fabulous view, so that deck will be great for them.
Okay. Any questions of Alan?
Hi, Alan, this is Blair. I had a question about the front porch. Is it completely covered?
Yes. There'll be a cover over the whole front porch. They want to be able to sit out there in all weather, and also, as you know, how the sun is here, especially this face is kind of southwest, and so it'll be nice that they absolutely needed to have a cover over it. And the cover is just going to be basically almost a flat roof. This roof is such that even the roof that's on there, you can't really see it from the street because it's so much higher than the street below on Utah.
And can you describe, I'm looking at your floor plan as well as your right side elevation. And when you compare the right side elevation to the left side elevation, the left side seems to be a single width porch, whereas the right side looks like it's a double or 1.5 width.
Although it's a smaller porch where the addition is for the classroom, and we just didn't take the roof out as far to cover that. It's the porch is similar, but we didn't take the roof out to cover it.
I don't know what
roof plan.
What's the right side apply to? Right side elevation, is that?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time. It's kind of, the sound is very good. The sound was better on the computer than it is on my phone.
Blair, I think is what you're looking at on that is they're putting an additional bump out on the house that's coming into the porch. That's why it looks narrower on the.
Oh.
Okay?
Yep, there you go, thank you.
You're welcome.
There you go, okay. But it doesn't show oh, never mind, now I got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Alan? Okay, hearing none, then since we don't have to really do any action on this, we'll just thank you for the presentation.
Technically, the committee is supposed to, you make a recommendation when the
okay.
items come before you.
Okay, any recommendations then about the 413 Utah?
Can we comment a little bit, or?
Sure, yeah.
I just wanted, my comments, I drove by the house the other day after looking at all these plans and everything, and with the, and with the north window report saying that this particular house is no longer contributing and stuff. I took a look at it, and I don't think it would ever be, and I think it's, with all the additions already been done to it, there's probably almost no way for it to be retrieved, shall we say. And I mean, it could be, but I mean, it'd be cost prohibitive for anybody to do it, and then they'd lose all the additional space that they put on, so it'd be silly to try and bring it back. And actually looking at the plan here with the new front porch and stuff, I think it might enhance it a little bit, make it fit in the neighborhood a little bit more, because so many houses do have nice front porches around, and not all of them, but I think it'll look new, yes, but I think it'll give a flavor of the area a little bit, the overall historic area. So just my comments. I hope it turns out well for them, and I don't see that, let them go for it on this, because it's not, it's not gonna hurt the historic area district at all. I don't see it being in any way detrimental to the historic district. I'm looking at possibly it'd be probably more of an enhancement, just to clean up the front a little bit and make it look a little nicer, and hopefully that, because it is right on Utah, I think it should benefit the whole area. That's just my thoughts.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Well, good. I'm glad that they can enjoy that porch for their family. All right.
Great, thank you, Alan.
Hey, please thank the committee for me and appreciate all the comments. I wish that I could have heard a couple of those a little better. It's funny, I could hear it better when the TV's on, but when I was on the phone, somehow it's distorting on my phone and it's not as easy to hear. But thank you so much and appreciate the opportunity to be on the phone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Okay. For possible action, presentation of the draft Boulder City Historic Plan by Heidi Swank, Nevada Preservation Foundation.
Okay, we're gonna get her on the,
Okay.
And Madam Chairwoman, while we're waiting for Heidi Swank to get be on the phone, I just wanted to provide a kind of frame this item. I know that the committee has been anxiously awaiting the results of this year-long effort to engage the community to provide feedback on historic preservation objectives for Boulder City.
Okay.
We started this process. Just a moment. Oh, yeah, just let Heidi know that we will have her begin the presentation in a moment. We started this process a year ago, and unfortunately we're hampered by COVID in engaging the community. You will recall that right before the lockdown, we did have an initial community meeting, and I know that Heidi's going to kind of go over all of that. But despite COVID, the Nevada Preservation Foundation looked for a way to engage the community further, and through that input, which Heidi will provide an overview for you tonight, has developed this draft plan for your consideration. And so, Heidi, if you can hear me, I'll let you do your introduction, and then as you're going through your PowerPoint slide, if you want to just let me know to advance the slide, I will do that for you.
Heidi, we've got a bit of a delay. Did you catch that? Heidi?
Sounds like you lost her.
Is the line there?
Heidi, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, if you could mute your computer on your end, we won't get the feedback, and we're ready to have you do the presentation now, and if you could just mention when you want Michael to progress slides, he can do that.
Okay, sounds good. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
You can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for having me, quote unquote, here tonight. My name is Heidi Swank. I am a board member with the Nevada Preservation Foundation and have been working on this plan for the past year, which was much longer, as Mr. Mays said, than we had all anticipated. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights of what we worked on and some of the recommendations that came out of the work we've done over the last year. I'll start out just a little bit about methodology. So in March of 2020, March 5th to be exact, there was a community workshop that we held in Boulder City that was attended by about 50 Boulder City residents. It sits really vividly in my brain because it's one of the last things that we did as Nevada Preservation in person. It was a great evening of a lot of small group discussions with different tables where people would move around and have conversations with staff members on different topics. They included what a historic preservation ordinance should be, also the role of a historic preservation committee, historic designation processes, and the role of historic preservation. So that was really what happened in March of 2020. Then we had came into the pandemic, and in fall of 2020, so we worked on some other options and talked through with Mr. Mays on how best to reach out to folks in Boulder City. So we came up with a video presentation and online survey that Mariana Ruiz and Mariana is our Director of Preservation Services, that we developed based and put together some rough recommendations based on the March workshop. So we presented these through Boulder City's TV channel and the YouTube channel, and then also utilized the utilities mailer to promote the survey to the community and to get input on this video presentation. And we received 169 responses from this effort, which we felt was a pretty good return. We had also thought about providing the option to do a response via mail or a response via telephone. And we found that really we had about 2 responses via telephone, but the majority of people seemed to be really comfortable with the online responses, so we brought in the most of those through there. Once we had gotten those put together, then we did the research, writing, and analysis, in which we compiled the plan, and that you see that we provided the draft version to you today. So I just want to take a little bit to walk through some of the highlights of the survey, and just touch on, there's a lot of other questions that were asked. These are just some that I thought were most notable that I wanted to bring up. Oh, and the entire survey is in the appendix of the Historic Preservation Plan. So one of the first questions we asked in the online survey is what is good historic preservation to people in Boulder City? And we asked them if they agreed with the statement that preservation means sometimes telling an owner, developer, property owner that they can't undertake their plans without making some changes. A lot of these questions like this were, people were asked to rank that on a scale of 0 to 100. As you can see here, it was close to 70. I believe it's actually at 69. So I think that there's definitely some hesitancy in the community, but I think there's more of a leaning toward the idea of understanding that good historic preservation means sometimes saying no to folks and finding an alternate path for them to achieve what they want with their building. Another question we asked was about demolition review, and we asked if Boulder City should delay and review demolition and include public input for at least 60 days. And we gave them various categories of buildings to rate as to whether or not this is something they would like to see for that category of building. I think the most interesting, however, is the last one, the level of agreement with the statement that Boulder City should never delay demolition. Clearly, that is not something that community members think should occur, that there should be some process for demolition delay and review. And it seems as though the most popular, the most common, the one that seemed the most palatable to folks was any building or structure or site that has been designated. So anything that's designated should definitely receive some kind of review with public input before any demolition is allowed or denied. Then we asked them also several questions about Historic Preservation Committee powers. And this was an interesting one in asking if the committee should be have the ability to approve or deny applications to rehabilitate or demolish resources, to move up that power from advisory to actually having the ability to say yay or nay. There's definitely a little bit more hesitancy in this area. As you can see, out of 100, this is 59, but it's still, I would say, still tips to the positive, and maybe an area that Boulder City would like to do a little bit more digging in and education on the tie between giving these powers to the Historic Preservation Committee and the ability to maintain the historic feel of Boulder City. We also asked about professional experience, and there was a lot of support, as you can see, for having members of the HPC that have some professional experience in certain areas. And I will also say I don't have this chart here, but it was also overwhelming support that those members should be voting members and not purely advisory members of the HPC. We asked them about grassroots designation and asking them what kind of process would you like to see as far as the percentage of votes and how one would go about putting in, what would be the requirements for a neighborhood to determine through voting whether or not they want to become designated. As you can see from here, the blue bar, the second bar, was the most popular, and that one, and I'm sorry, I couldn't get it to print out the entire statement, but that one states that they must have 51% of the homeowners signed on in support. The one that came in second, the very bottom one, that one states that you must have at least 51% signing on in support and not have 20% in opposition. So the idea with the 20% is that if you have 20% in opposition, that would trump any number of, even if you had 60% in support, if you had 20% in opposition, it would still, the designation effort would come to a stop. So those two seem to be the most palatable to folks. I think the threshold of having 30% of homeowners in support of a designation is not something that I think this idea of majority rules holds very strongly in Boulder City, and I think it's a good way to go if you want to put in place some way for this grassroots designation. So I'm going to, from here, talk a little bit about some of the recommendations. I'm just pulling out some of the larger recommendations that we made throughout the Historic Preservation Plan, and then after that, I'm happy to take any questions. So one of the big issues I think that Boulder City is currently facing is in the design guidelines and compliance. And again, this gets back to the powers of the HPC and what came out of the newly updated Janus report, that the survey that Northwind did. So these numbers from 1983 and 2020 come out of the work that Northwind just did, where we see in Boulder City a significantly larger percentage of buildings that are no longer eligible, that are in the historic district. This is hard to see often at the street level, where you may have one building here or one building there. But I think that having design guidelines in place and giving the HPC the ability to approve or deny plans can help to stem this loss, if that is what the track that Boulder City would like to go down. As far as demolition review, we would really suggest creating a process for reviewing, approving, and denying demolitions. Survey participants definitely stated a preference for a well laid out process. I know that Phoenix has an excellent process that is very transparent, reaches out to organizations like Preserve Nevada and Nevada Preservation for input, brings in the public. And I think if this is something that Boulder City is interested in, that looking at that Phoenix model is a really good one. I've used it in the past. As far as the role of the HPC, I think it is definitely worth, especially looking at the numbers, the findings of the Northwind survey of making HPC decisions binding, but of course that to have an appeal process that after HPC, that decision then goes on to Planning Commission and then goes on to City Council. I think having that type of process, but allowing HPC the ability to say, no, this does not fit the design guidelines, and then it would then be able to be either stopped at that point or moved on to Planning Commission through an appeal process. And also to include members with specific professional backgrounds in a voting capacity. As far as designation processes, I think it's important to continue to educate the public on this process and solicit their input. I do think that despite efforts to educate around how neighborhoods can become historic districts on their own, there's not a lot of comfort with how that process would work. And I think that there's a bit more of education that needs to go on. And I firmly believe that if it wasn't for the pandemic, we would have been able to, by being in front of people and working in groups, Nevada Preservation would have been able to get further in educating the community on how these designation processes could work for them at the grassroots level. But given just the obstacles we ran into in 2020, I think this is going to require a bit more work. I think once people understand it, they'll get it and they'll like it, but I just think we couldn't quite get there. As far as preservation incentives, I think everybody loves to have the financial incentives, but we also know that right now that may not be feasible. I do think that there's a lot to be done in Boulder City, but honestly across the entire state of Nevada on regulatory relief for designated resources. I think there are a lot of models across the country looking at how to provide variances and some code relief to the redo of buildings and the rehabilitation of buildings, as long as they don't cause life and safety issues. But I think that, and I know in the plan, we put in some recommendations for what you could look at as far as regulatory relief. But I think honestly, this is currently in Nevada, I believe the most significant roadblock to the rehabilitation and reuse of our historic resources is not having that local level regulatory relief for developers and people who want to reuse those buildings, but may need to find a path forward to work on everything from, could be ceiling heights and setbacks to parking, but to try to find a way to make this easier through regulatory relief. I think one of the biggest issues, and then the last piece I'll talk about here, is amending the master plan. I think that there are some pieces in the master plan that should be amended soon. And I think these tie into the findings from the Northwind survey, especially in talking about the central business district. So there are several spots in the master plan that encourage the alteration of the street view of a building. And in all cases, in order to maintain the historic integrity of the building. And again, that's a balancing act for the city to determine where they would like this to be. But as a historic preservationist, looking at it from that perspective, there's a lot of these alterations that should be avoided, and maybe some that should be stepped back. There's a section in the master plan that talks about the encouraging of upper floors. There's definitely ways to add on second floors to buildings. However, you want to be sure that your sight lines are taken into account, that your upper floors are stepped back away from the building so as not to change that view from the ground floor. Probably the biggest issue that I can see in terms of the master plan is the encouragement of porticos. It's hot in southern Nevada. It's a lot of sun, and we know that. I would suggest, though, that porticos are a permanent way that you're providing shade. If a portico was not originally on the building, I would strongly suggest looking at other ways to create shade that are removable from the building. Porticos will undermine the historic integrity because they take over the entire street view of the building. And so I would suggest that Boulder City move away from the encouragement of porticos and look for other non-permanent ways to create shade. And then as far as renovations, I think following the Secretary of Interior standards for renovations is extremely important. We want to keep in mind, and a lot of, there's some publications that are in the appendix of this document that talk through how to do renovations. And often there's a perception that renovations should look like they were always part of that building. But actually, for historic preservation purposes, you don't want that. You don't want an addition or a second floor to look like it was original. It should look new. It should be of the same size, the same massing, because we don't want to create a sense of history for the building that is incongruent with what has actually happened. When you put a renovation and an addition on a building, that's part of the story of that building. We want to be sure we mark that chapter by not making that renovation look like it was always part of that building. So in conclusion, Boulder City is, of course, one of the most storied cities in Southern Nevada with a history of national importance. It's also a city that relies upon its history and historic architecture to not only provide a sense of place for Boulder City residents, but to also provide visitors with a feel of an early era of Southern Nevada. Today, with development pressures and an increasing number of historic structures in Boulder City, a plan such as this one is critical to the future of this community. Nevada Preservation firmly believes that Boulder City is at an important juncture in terms of historic preservation. The findings that came from the recent updated survey of the historic district show that historic resources in Boulder City have been significantly undermined over the last 3 decades. Now, there are many resources remaining that can and should be restored, rehabilitated, and protected. And in this historic preservation plan, we hope we have provided some solid recommendations that can keep Boulder City as the historic hub of Southern Nevada. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions for Northwind?
No, this is NPF.
Oh, excuse me?
We're not at Northwind yet. This is National Preservation.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Any questions for National Historic Preservation?
Hi, Heidi, this is Blair. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you. I just had a few questions. The first one is, in reading through this, when you discuss the committee, you talk about professional backgrounds or professional positions, and I just wondered, will you clarify what professional means? Is that just Secretary of Interior standards or professional position standards or others? So for instance, you mentioned one of the positions on the committee might be a realtor, but there's no Secretary of Interior standards for that expertise. So.
Correct. And so, no, I don't mean that. As far as recommendations, as far as professions, not necessarily do they need to meet Secretary of Interior standards. I think that a realtor would be, any realtor who has knowledge of the real estate market would be helpful. An architect would be helpful. Architectural historian would be perfect, right? But sometimes these are hard to find. But if you look at other historic preservation committees across the country, they have folks from these different professions to provide that perspective of expertise.
So there's really 2 types of committee members: professional historic preservation folks, and then others with a background in historic preservation.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding that question.
There's, I guess I'm trying to clarify what the makeup of the committee or commission is what I'm proposing should be. And that would include those with professional historic preservation background or education or expertise. But then there's others, such as realtors, as an example, who don't have a professional historic preservation background, they just have the knowledge or interest in historic preservation.
Correct.
They're professional
Correct. And
realtors, but they're not professional historic preservation members or people.
Realtors, no. So it wouldn't need to be a realtor who meets Secretary of Interior standards, just a realtor.
Okay. And then my second question is, I noticed that you just cited the master plan, and I was curious why the strategic plan wasn't also identified. And I think I know what the answer is, and that is the master plan is the overarching master plan for the city, and everything tiers or should tier from that. So the strategic plan, though, has some good information as well that supposedly tiers from the master plan. Did you look at the strategic plan as well?
We did look at the strategic plan, and we did, and I will say too that I should say that the main person who worked on that part of this plan is out on maternity leave, and so I can, on some of these questions, I can go back to her and get back to you, but she's definitely out for another month and a half. But we did look at the strategic plan, but we thought going from the master plan would be, as that's kind of the overarching document for Boulder City, that was going back to that source. But if there are specific pieces from the strategic plan you would like us to pull in, please let us know. We can take a look at that too.
And then my final question is, and this is maybe for Michael as well, but how do you want comments, and how much time do we have to provide comments?
Well, certainly we want to give the committee enough time to review this document and provide comments to the Nevada Preservation Foundation so that they can incorporate those potential changes before we would present this to the City Council. So I would, I guess, refer back to Heidi in terms of how much time, and I'm sure it's subject to the amount of comments the committee would provide, and the Preservation Foundation's ability to turn around that document so we can present it to the City Council.
And do you want those comments in like a matrix form, or line through, or list? If you can let us know what.
Heidi, what would work best for you?
You know, we can work with however each individual commissioner would like to give us their comments. We're more than happy to take them individually. I don't think they would need to be compiled into one document, and we can kind of configure them together and get them integrated into the plan.
And
however it is easiest for you all. I think that's my answer.
And is 30 days to review too much, too little, given the contract deadlines? Or I'm not sure what the contract deadlines are.
That's fine for us, as long as, I mean, we can work within those kinds of deadlines, whatever works. I don't know when you'd want to have this in front of City Council.
I think in terms of the timing, because we also have the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee that we will be providing this plan to. I would think 30 days would be reasonable, and at the same time, we'd want to ensure if committee members are sending individual comments and there are conflicts with those comments, I'd want to be able to bring those potential conflicts back to the Historic Preservation Committee, so that you get the revised document before I would take it to the city council, so that everyone on the committee is on the same page. So perhaps if we could shoot for providing the comments within the next, Susan, the next committee meeting is, what's the day? Looks like February 24th. So Heidi, reasonably, how much time would you need to be able to make changes based on the input from the committee?
I think we would maybe we could probably turn it around in a month, depending on the extent of the revisions.
So it would probably be a challenge then to bring this back by the 24th of February. So then we'd be looking at the 24th of March to bring it back before the Historic Preservation Committee. Make sure that everyone's input is received and that there's no conflicts between the committee members' input. And then following Historic Preservation Committee second review, then we'd look to present this to the council in April.
Okay, sounds like a workable plan.
Does that work for Nevada Preservation Foundation?
That works for us just fine. Mm-hmm.
Heidi, I have a question.
Is your mic on?
Heidi, this is Mary Ann Wainwright. I have a question. On your recommendation to update the executive powers, specifically approve or denying applications, based on your background research in other locations, why do you recommend changing us from advisory the
Voting.
with the voting?
So I think that one of the things that comes out of when a Historic Preservation Committee has the ability to approve or deny applications for alterations is that you all have spent time thinking about historic preservation and the history of your community and spent time learning about historic preservation and Secretary of Interior standards. So I think in order, if the intent of Boulder City is to maintain that historic integrity, the Historic Preservation Committee's ability to say yes or no and provide guidance that has some teeth to it will help to maintain that historic integrity of those buildings. And I think where you see that Historic Preservation Committees are advisory only, you lose all that experience that you all have gained and gotten from being a member of the HPC as well as going to conferences. It isn't always taken up by the building owners, and so then you do find that you have an increased number of buildings that no longer are eligible for like a national register or local register. They just get undermined.
Okay. And so with that, it would be essential to have 3 to 4 voting members with professional backgrounds on the committee, correct?
It would be helpful. I think you should definitely have, it's often helpful to, and people, and cities do this in various ways. Some cities they'll designate this seat is for a realtor, this seat is for a Nevada historian. You'll also have some where you designate a seat for historic districts. So you have a representative from the community in a historic district who comes. And then you also have at-large members who don't have that professional background, who are people who love Boulder City, understand Boulder City, who've been there for a long time. And they also have seats on Historic Preservation Committee. You can do it where you assign specific fields to a seat, or you could say we want 3 members in a lot. You could take a list of like 7 different professional qualifications and say we want to have at least 3 people on the committee who come from those fields, and then the rest are ad hoc members.
Okay, and so we would.
Sorry, not ad hoc, at-large members.
Right.
My apologies.
So we would need to start out with guiding documents such as the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, the city code that might need to be updated prior to instituting any changes in the powers of the Historic Preservation Committee.
Yeah, I believe, and Mr. Mays may be able to speak to this more directly, but I believe it would have to go through City Council in order to make that change.
But
Yeah.
the city code would need to be updated prior to that change, right?
Correct, and that's part of the reason the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee has been created, is to evaluate the existing city code regulations with respect to historic preservation and make recommendations on those potential changes.
Very good. Okay. We through now with comments? No, Ray? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Heidi. This is Ray Turner, and I'm going back to issue number 2 on page 54 of the draft, the role of the Historic Preservation Committee. Is this part of, did you work on this part of the draft, Heidi? Is this something you're familiar with?
Let me find it quick. I'm just going back in the document. Page 52, you said?
54?
54, okay. My computer is not cooperating. 53. Okay, what is the question on here?
Well,
This was Ms. Ruiz wrote this piece, but I read through it too. So
okay. Well, again, I'm coming back to the issue number 2, the HPC membership qualification. What is the intent of this inclusion in the draft here, this number 2? What is the intent of, what are you trying to convey to us?
I think here what we're trying to talk about is, let me read back to the specific one. So this gets back to the issue of whether or not the decision of the HPC is binding, and if there should be members on the HPC that have professional qualifications, and whether or not they should have a voting role in there. And so this just brings up that as an issue, and then recommendations are made later in the document.
Because I don't see any language in there that conveys that or comes remotely close to that, unless I miss it. Maybe it's somewhere else that I'm not seeing.
I think that Ms. Ruiz is referring in the bullet points 1 and 2 to specific sections of the city code that outline those powers and qualifications.
Okay. Well then, so that's on page 54. So I'm assuming that number 2, which is continued on page 55, states that the Historic Preservation Committee consists of 5 voting members who are residents of Boulder City with no professional background in historic preservation, architecture, real estate, urban planning, history, building construction, archaeology, or art history. So could you, I don't understand what are you trying to convey with that?
I think that here, because later on, she makes recommendations that suggest that including members with a couple of those professional backgrounds would be helpful. And so here she is just outlining that those 5 voting members do not have to have that background at this point.
Because our current code requires that. That is a requirement. That's already a requirement. And when I got appointed to the committee, I had to meet with council members and justify my presence on the committee with my background. So my background is I am a tile professional, contractor, and my experience is actually in restoring homes in Los Angeles, which I did for 10 years, just like the homes here in Boulder City. I also am president of a local history and arts foundation, which you are well aware of, because we've had you up here and gave you a tour of the historic filtration plant. So I'm just a little bit, I can't help but get the impression, because there's a lot of references to the HPC having members with professional background, justifications for being there. And it states here in the draft that this committee consists of 5 voting members who have no professional background. Blair Davenport does have professional background. I have building construction, art, history, and I can't speak for everyone else here, but it was my understanding, and it is stated in our code, that you must have one of these backgrounds to be on the committee.
So I think what Ms. Ruiz is trying to convey here is that currently there are not a requirement that you have a certain number of people. So for example, I can talk about the way that the City of Las Vegas has I think it's a 9-member historic preservation committee. There are 4 members who are from who live in a historic district. So their seat is reserved for those 4 person from that historic district. They have a seat that is reserved for a realtor. They have a seat that is reserved for someone who is knowledgeable in Nevada history. They have a seat reserved for someone who represents a historical society. And so I think that's what she's trying to get at here, is that the idea of having specific seats reserved for people with specific backgrounds. I don't think she's not in this addressing the current members of the Historic Preservation Commission. She's talking more about reserving specific seats, and that may just be a wrong wording in that paragraph.
Heidi, this is Susan. Just to clarify, I think what Ray is bringing up is that our current code, What Ray was bringing up is that our current code was amended about a year ago when a little more than a year ago, when we obtained certified local government status. And one of the state requirements is that we have at least one person on the committee with a professional background relative to architectural or historical preservation standards, et cetera. And presently, Member Davenport meets that criteria. So I think he's just pointing out a comment that's an error that needs to be fixed in the draft plan.
Right, and I think I'm just trying to clarify that. I think that's what Ms. Ruiz meant, was this idea of reserving seats, and so I think that's what she was trying to convey there, and not necessarily in the best way.
Well, Heidi, thank you for that explanation, but frankly, it's not good enough for me, because this is a clear statement. I mean, what we're hearing here is that there are issues that need to be addressed. One of those issues is our qualification as members, and the only language that follows that recommendation to study the membership qualification is a statement that makes the claim, it's a claim, it's a statement that none of us have any experience in the professional backgrounds that are required in our ordinance. I mean, there is no language that comes anywhere close to anything that you just gave us as a reason for this error.
Sir,
I mean, this is...
Sir, and I'm making an apology. It was an error in writing. And I'm extremely sorry that it was in there, but there was no That was not her intent. I can tell you that was not her intent, and I can give you an apology, and we will fix it.
Well, it has to be mentioned to you, and it's nobody is giving you a tongue lashing here. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm expressing that I'm not impressed with so far with this type of error, and I would like to see less of it. And I also, I think anybody that was reading this would come to the conclusion after reading that sentence that our committee is somehow inadequate. And that's a gross failure on your part. It's not a failure on my part, but I'm just pointing that out, and I would just like that to be addressed. And I don't want to see any, I wouldn't like to see any effort to insinuate that the committee is somehow inadequate. Because we've actually had a lot of successes. The committee has done a lot of work over the last 5, 6, 7 years. We've had a lot of successes. We are the ones that are responsible for the current discussion about our preservation code. And I think that our committee deserves a lot of praise. I don't pat myself on the back, but to see something like that stated in such an important document it's not acceptable. So I just wanted to make that clear. So thank you.
Okay, any other comments at this time? Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Heidi, for your presentation.
And if I may make one more statement?
Sure.
So I just wanted to let the committee know that we have a new, at Nevada Preservation, we have a new executive director. Her name is Cynthia Ammerman. She is actually watching. She's here, even though you can't see her. She just started with us on January 13th. She is currently working remote from Kansas City. She is an architectural historian with about 15 years of experience in architectural history. She'll be moving here at the end of the month. I have taken a position with Minnesota's statewide historic preservation nonprofit, heading that effort up in Minnesota, and I sadly will be leaving Nevada, which I can't believe I am, but I am leaving Nevada in about 2 weeks to move to Minneapolis, St. Paul to head up their historic preservation in the state of Minnesota. So I just wanted to take the moment to thank Boulder City. We have done a lot of great work together. Nevada Preservation is super excited about continuing all of that work with you. And I believe that Nevada Preservation is in excellent hands with Ms. Ammerman. And I'm looking forward to seeing where she takes Nevada Preservation next. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm moving on, but my heart will always be in Nevada.
Well, Heidi, we're going to miss you. You've made a tremendous impact in the state of Nevada, and especially in the Clark County, Las Vegas area. And I felt very privileged when we hired your consulting firm, because we knew your reputation and your track record, and we were proud of that. We were glad to be associated with you, and we'll miss you. So congratulations, and I'm really happy for you. I know it's probably a step up, you know, or you wouldn't be moving to the snow country from this beautiful area. So congratulations, and we'll look forward to working with our new person.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Good
You're
luck
welcome.
and thank you.
Okay, all right. So we're going to go into our next item, and discussion and update on the 2020 survey of the Historic District by Northwind Resource Consulting, LLC.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Before you and in your packet is the updated survey from Northwind. It has been reviewed by SHPO, and there are very just minor changes with it, and so the report has been endorsed by SHPO. What we're still waiting for SHPO to provide input on is the individual short forms. These are the individual listings for every property within the historic district. They have been reviewing north wind surveys. They indicate that for the most part, they're in agreement with Northwind's findings, but they may make some recommendations on changes regarding whether certain properties are contributing or non-contributing. So we're waiting for that, but we wanted to make sure that you had the updated report, and I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions at this time for Northwind? I know that was a very lengthy report, so you may not have had time to really go through that, but any questions at this time?
I've got one.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a general question, you know, I looked at the previous one of this North Winds a little bit, you know, when I first came on board here, and one of the things that struck me, and I'm sure it struck everybody, is the number of buildings that have gone down, fallen out of being of significance. And, you know, the possibility that, you know, we could lose our historic, historic district standing and such. How does that affect all of this if something like that were to happen? I mean, where, you know, the powers to be get a hold of this is, well, you've only got 200 buildings left that are of historic significance in Boulder City. You know, what are the ramifications from that if something comes from it? I mean, I'm just curious. I'm just kind of out of my wheelhouse on an answer, but something like that. I mean,
it's something that I've had the conversation with Courtney Mooney, who is with Northwind. In summary, the National Register nomination still exists. And the intent with updating this survey was not to resubmit to the National Register. The intent was to provide the city a 40-year update on the status of our historically significant properties within the community, and to be a guide for the Historic Preservation Committee as well as the community at large as to what are the current conditions today. So I think primarily this study and the individual short forms are an updated resource and a tool for this committee as you evaluate potential changes to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, as you evaluate individual property modifications that come before you. Certainly, we have been utilizing the draft short forms in the recent reports that we've been presenting to the committee, and it provides even more information than the Janus report did from 1983. So that's the primary purpose, is it's a tool for the committee.
thank you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about the SHPO is looking at the short forms, and they may change the designation of some from contributing to non-contributing or vice versa. That means then the report will have to be changed as well, because it lists, you know, it identifies in what's on the short form. They go together. So will this report change potentially?
The report and any reference to the individual properties, but specifically to the total number of contributing and non-contributing, would obviously be modified.
Okay.
But it would be minor to the report. Predominantly, it's going to be to the short forms. But in my conversation with SHPO, they didn't anticipate very many changes to recommendations.
It's just basically quantifying the quantities will be updated.
In the report, yes.
In the report. And so do you have a list of what the SHPO's comments were to the report? Or what do we know that they agreed to or not agreed to?
Yeah, I can provide those listed modifications for you.
Thank you.
And then certainly when we get the feedback on any modifications they make to the short forms, will provide you those specific short forms so you can see what SHPO's recommended changes are.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, all right. Moving on then, for possible action, consideration of historic water filtration plant improvement for CCCHP grant application.
No, item 5 is the ad hoc committee.
Okay, I'm sorry, I went to 6. Thank you. Let's go back then. For possible action, update from the Historic Preservation Ad Hoc Committee. Sorry about that. Ray, do you want to start?
I think I'm going to start.
Oh, you want to? Okay.
So the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee met on December 14th. That was our first meeting, and the committee includes myself, Blair Davenport, Tracy Folda, Mayor Kiernan McManus, and Tracy is a council member, and Ray Turner, who's also on the Historic Preservation Committee. Also present at that meeting was Brittany Walker, the acting city attorney, and Michael Mays, acting city manager. And I'll just kind of briefly describe what was on the agenda. So the first item was a discussion of the rules of procedures for the new committee. The second item was the election of committee chair and vice chairman. And so I was nominated or voted to be the committee chairman, and Kiernan McManus is the vice chairman. The third agenda item was to discuss the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee work plan. And I believe Michael has given to all of us a copy of that work plan that I drafted and we discussed. And we did add and make some comments. I don't know if this has any of those changes. There weren't that many, but have a look at it as far as what the work plan is, which includes the purpose of the committee, which is we're working to recommend changes to the Historic Preservation Code, City Code Title 11, Chapter 27, Historic Resources, and to make those recommendations to City Council eventually. And also we identified the ad hoc committee's goals and objectives, and those are listed here. And I'll just kind of read that the bottom line is we're supposed to help update the code. And hopefully the city will adopt an updated code. And then you'll see in the work plan kind of an outline of different tasks and who those tasks are assigned to and dates for completing those tasks in order to update the code. I think that's it. Let's see. Relevant to the committee, we're supposed to meet at least one meet. We're supposed to meet every 3 months. We discussed trying to work with the public on updating the code, trying to kind of strategize some ways to involve or inform the community of what we're working on and get their input. We talked about potentially, holding workshops, or if COVID is still around, going through the virtual meeting process, perhaps. We wanted to make sure that our work in updating the code is conveyed to the community somehow. And so utilizing social media, the city's website is another way of conveying that information. And I think also the Historic Preservation Committee, we can help with that effort as well, based on updates from the ad hoc committee. And as well as, updating the committee of what the ad hoc committee is working on. There's too many committees. So the next item that we had was, we had a presentation from Charlie Hantz. He is a former Historic Preservation Committee member, and he provided a really thorough timeline and history of, in consolidating dates and code references and changes that were made over 37 years leading up to the beginning of the Historic Preservation Committee. So in summary, he noted, quote, "This is not, what he presented was not such a brief history of historic preservation. However, he did point out the fact that the city's record regarding preservation of the city's historic character is a pretty dismal one." These are his words. And he sincerely hopes that the actions of the ad hoc committee and the present city council, and I would add the current historic preservation committee that's here tonight, going forward will create an historic preservation code that will arrest the degradation of historic buildings within the historic district. Creation of a defensible and acceptable code will not be easy, but the rewards for doing so will be great. So again, thank you to Charlie for his efforts for conveying that history, and that history as well as what he wrote up. I think we talked about adding that to the city's website on the city's historic preservation page so that the public can see the history of what we've done in the as far as historic preservation is concerned. We then talked at length about the different types of preservation codes. We had 4 model preservation codes that we looked at. The first model, which comes from Nevada, the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office has already created a model code. And that first model includes a historic preservation officer position. That would be a city staff position. And I believe it's the Las Vegas model, or the Las Vegas code kind of models, is modeled on that, where they had or have a historic preservation position on city staff. Mm-hmm. The second model is the same Nevada model, or historic preservation model code, but it does not include a historic preservation officer position. The third model was the Boulder City 2000 code, and then the fourth model is our current code. So I think what we talked about, or what I recall we spoke about, was we would like to move forward with the Nevada model, and we were going to, discuss, does that include the officer, the historic preservation officer or not? But, and also to look at the 2000 code, which was pretty good. It's outdated, but there was some good information in there that could be incorporated perhaps in the updated code, the model code from Nevada. We discussed and agreed that the new code needs to reference Nevada revised statutes, city planning documents, the city strategic plan, and other city planning documents, or at least align, of course, with those planning documents and those statutes. It discussed, we wanted to make sure that the code, adequately designates or has identifies how to designate historic neighborhoods and to establish historic properties, basically nominating properties not only to the National Register, but the local register, especially to the local register. There needs to, of course, continue to be reference to our CLG, Certified Local Government Status. We recommended, there was a recommendation to change the name of the Historic Preservation Committee to the Historic Preservation Commission. And that kind of aligns with what I think was in the draft Historic Preservation Plan from Nevada Preservation Foundation, as far as that perhaps helps with making, instead of being an advisory committee or commission, it's an executive committee or commission. There was a discussion about requiring or recommending that the certificate of appropriateness is used by residents in order to apply for, or in conjunction when applying for building or other permits, to ensure that the certificate of appropriateness identifies and or references any updated guidance for design and construction and rehabilitation. And there's a number of different guidelines that are out there already, but in particular, we looked at the Boise, Idaho's code and their guidance, which was interesting because it was a lot more broad as far as the issues that they were providing guidance on, such as sustainability improvements. They talk about windmills and solar panels and that kind of thing. Like what type of sustainable energy improvements can be made in a historic district. Landscaping and site improvements is a big issue in the Boise's code or their guidance, which I'd like to see added to our code or our guidance. And then, of course, continue to adhere to the Secretary of Interior's standards for historic preservation needs to continue. And then finally, I believe we directed and asked city staff to provide additional information and resources to the ad hoc committee, which will be hopefully presented at our next meeting, which is February 22nd. And at that meeting, I believe the city attorney is going to review I'm not sure if there's all 4 models or just the 2 Nevada models, but that she was tasked to do that. We were going to look at the resource material that's going to be provided. We're going to look at, again, continually look at the work plan for every meeting to make sure that we're on task and on schedule, and maybe start drafting documents or the code itself. Did I catch everything, Ray?
That was a lot.
Sorry.
You guys did a lot.
And then, Michael, did I miss anything? Because thank you for, being the note taker and the brain trust for that committee.
No, that was a very comprehensive overview.
Okay.
Okay, now,
Any
you
questions?
mentioned you're going to do this every 3 months, correct?
The ordinance or it's not, is it an ordinance? I don't know what.
The bylaws.
The bylaws
For the committee.
state that we should meet at least every 3 months, but we're meeting more often. Hopefully we'll meet more often than that.
Okay, and then, so do you have a timeline then that you're going to, did you make just like a year or?
So the work plan does have a kind of it does not have start dates or due dates yet.
I noticed that, that's why I'm asking.
We didn't get to that part yet.
Okay,
So I think we'll probably address, an actual timeline, hopefully, because we didn't have, or some members of the committee didn't have all of the information that they needed in order to figure out, like, what do we all have to do to move forward? So
Yeah,
hopefully
okay.
we'll have a good schedule.
okay, all right, that's good. Well, it sounds like you guys accomplished quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing your timeline and further information. Thank you so much for the time invested in this. It's very good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, let's see. Let's make sure I'm on the right number this time. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I
Mary.
just have one question. When you spoke about landscaping and the elements, is that going to address fencing or fence posts or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It basically addresses landscape features, which is fencing, walls, sidewalks, streets, kind of the holistic view of not just a building, but the surrounding area of not only the building or the home or the business, but also the district as a whole. So, and that includes trees and shrubbery and potentially.
Okay, Glenn, did you have a question or comment?
It sounds like they got an awful lot done in one meeting, and you've got quite a load of work ahead of you to fulfill all of that. Bless you for taking that project on, and best of luck with it. And well, I mean, that it all comes to fruition in a reasonable length of time, and you get all the help you need and stuff, and hopefully we can be of some assistance too. So, but again, you got a lot done in one meeting, so thank you.
Well, thank you for offering help, and we will be asking for help.
Okay, very good. All right, number 6, for possible action, consideration of historic water filtration plant improvements for the CCCHP grant application.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
On 128, under the building assessment, it says roof excluded, but then on the, where's that other page? On the unallowable costs, it says roofing is allowable. So it doesn't say doesn't need fixing, it just says, I'm assuming NIC means not included, right? Is that correct?
I would guess that means because they just put a new roof on there about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they probably evaluate no roof work needs to be done at this time.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, would you like me to, okay.
I just wrote the report for you. It's yours.
So the city council has requested additional input from the Historic Preservation Committee regarding this project, as the committee is well aware, because you initiated this request to have the city look at budgeting for monies in our capital improvement program for fiscal year 22 to rehab the historic preservation plant. You can see with page 72, this is the page reference from the CIP workshop that was held with the City Council. And the cost estimates were based on the Stantec Studies analysis of the building when they did their comprehensive study of city facilities. What we have projected in the budget is to utilize $300,000 of RDA funds, redevelopment funds, to contribute toward the rehab improvements as a match for the Commission for Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation grant. This grant will become eligible approximately in July of this year. And so in order to apply for the grant, we needed to initiate the process for budgeting for this project. The council just wants to confirm with the committee that the scope of work that was outlined in the Stantec analysis is comprehensive from the committee's perspective on the rehabilitation efforts for the filtration plant.
You guys did a marvelous job. I'm glad that this has been done so that we can.
I don't think.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's, all right. Yeah, I'm glad that, maybe I'm not speaking into it right. I'm glad that for all of the things that came together to make this possible so that we could move forward with the rehabilitation of the historic water filtration plant. And I wanted to commend primarily Mayor McManus and Ray, who continually brought this to the public here in Boulder City and made sure that the building was opened up so that we could take tours and see some of the problems. I know this has been a long process for this particular building. It goes back about 6 or 7 years ago. But I think that Mayor McManus and Ray deserve a lot of credit to help the community understand that this was a building that we wanted to take seriously. And I think the city of Boulder City has taken it seriously with this proposal with a capital improvement. I know Blair came along and also helped push that into more of a reality so that we could do the grant process. So like Mr. Michael told us that it had to be done this way. So in order to get the grant, that we'd have to do the budgeting with the city. So this has been a marvelous, to me, it's a marvelous project to watch and see all of the members of the community working together to make this a reality. So you're seeing a really work in progress that has been quite interesting to watch from my vantage point as a community member, and I'm delighted to see this go forward. Any other comments?
I do. I need some clarification, I guess, in that what the city is looking to do is implement a 500K project. That's the bottom line, correct?
No, not the bottom line. This is based on the cost estimates from the Stantec study and associated engineering and other factors to be able to move forward with the proposed improvements in the Stantec study. So the question for the council tonight, does this encapsulate everything that you would like to see with the restoration effort?
That's why I'm confused, because the Stantec report states 380, let's say 382K.
Mm-hmm.
So the other 200K is for what, or where is that?
So on
down.
page 72, you have the CIP summary of the project. This is what was presented to the city council. What we did is we asked Public Works Department, which would oversee this project, to look at the Stantec analysis. The Stantec analysis estimated costs of $381,904, but they also had to factor in design, management, and contingency costs, which equates to the $500,000.
Design, management, and contingency. Okay.
Correct.
So my question then is, what is my question? Contingency costs. All right. So does that mean that 200K or whatever that amount is above 381,904 is to cover, let's say, the potential allowable costs that's shown on page 60 for construction documents, including historic structure reports and other reports critical to the architectural assessment of the building?
You're referring to page 60?
Well, that's the packet, 60 or page 14 of, I'm not sure what that 14 is attributed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is to be reflective of the requirements through the grant program.
Oh, so they're requiring certain things in order for us to qualify for that grant?
Right, we want to put ourselves in the best position to be eligible for the grant.
Okay.
And I guess for the committee's benefit, I think the thing to focus on is page 58. Because what staff will do with committee guidance, if there are additional improvements that you want us to look at, we will factor those in as well, and then when we go back to the city council, we will revise the cost estimate. I wouldn't focus on the dollars. I would focus on page 58. Is the improvements that are listed on page 58 encapsulating everything that you would like to see with the restoration of the water filtration plant?
So, the HSR is, in my opinion, an important document that needs to be created. And that historic structure report should address what is potentially or what is identified in the Stantec report, which is very general. And I guess my question, though, is the Stantec report, these recommendations are not for, are they considered improvements? Is it just stabilization? What is what, I don't understand, or what is their definition of what they want to do as it relates to applying for preservation grant funds that are for stabilization, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration. I guess I'm trying to figure out, because I don't think we have a plan yet as far as how that building will be used.
Right.
Or, so personally, I don't think it's considered a rehabilitation. It's a preservation project. We're just trying to keep it from falling down and make it a little bit more available to the public, because I think that's a requirement when you receive funds from the SHPO, Historic Preservation Funds, that it has to remain open to the public somehow.
Okay.
So in my brain, I'm calling it an exhibit. The building is an exhibit for the public to see, because we're not turning it into an art center or someone's home or office space, or I don't think we want to go that route, but the Historic Structures Report needs to know that in order to make recommendations. And so what are the recommendations? How do they match in the Stantec report?
Member Davenport, I think that's a good question to ask, and I think this would be like a two-step approach, and I agree with what you're saying, that the first step is preservation. When Stantec looked at all of the city facilities, they were looking at existing conditions and deficiencies to give the community a roadmap on how to maintain and preserve those buildings, and specifically with our historically significant buildings, looking at the current conditions and preservation efforts. So I think that with this initial grant, it is a focus on preservation, because you're correct, the community hasn't made any decisions on how ultimately to utilize the facility. Certainly, the building in and of itself is a cultural resource and would be part of what the city would be submitting for the grant application in defense and arguing for grant dollars for preservation.
So basically, they were, Stantec was trying to make this safe. Is that kind of like what they were doing, like to bring it like to safety codes, or?
No, it's to preserve the historical integrity of the structure. So when you look at some of the interior examples, I know that windows, I'm looking for the specific reference to the tuck pointing of the exterior. I mean, these were things that were identified that needed work to preserve the building.
Okay, so it is a historic issue then?
Historic preservation.
Yeah, right. So, okay.
So there were some things that I noticed, and this is where I think that these are just recommendations from Stantec at a certain point in time. And therefore, even though they reference $381K,
Oops, sorry.
that money doesn't have to go specifically to that one line item. So for instance, acid washing of the exterior walls, which is not a recommendation I would make to historic masonry, brick, but anyway. So instead of 500 or 101K going to that, perhaps then we could use that money for rodent exclusion, or pest management, maybe security system additions, whether that's cameras, lighting, alarm systems. So anyway, I guess that's another question I have, is if we need to, or how strict are we to comply with this, or is this what the city council wants? Do we agree with what the Stantec report says, or do we have additions or changes to what Stantec?
That's exactly what the council's looking for, is your guidance on the improvements. And if there's improvements you think that shouldn't be included, then they won't be included. And then we will recalculate what the grant application would be for and how much money would be coming from the RDA to complement that.
Do we have to be that specific, though? I mean, can we just say, I mean, the 381K looks pretty good as far as a ballpark class 3 estimate. But I mean, if Stantec made these estimates and we changed, instead of acid washing, and we want insect rodent, who makes that estimate? The city?
We would have that updated, yes. So if you have guidance to us, then I will take it back to Public Works. We will revise the estimate so that we can convey to the city council, based on your recommendations, these are the improvements, the restoration improvements that the city should focus on.
And do you need those tonight, or?
No, if you want to take more time, just to give you an understanding, at least the timetable for the capital improvement plan, we're going to be going back to the city council with the capital improvement plan in March. So what I would recommend is that you review this, and if you have any additional suggestions, you could send them to me directly, and then next month I can report out collectively the different improvements. Depending on when you get me your proposed improvements, I try to work with Public Works to identify costs, but again, that's not critical at this stage. What's critical at this stage is getting the input from the committee on what you think the restoration effort should include. We'll work out the dollars for the CIP that will go before the city council and the subsequent grant application.
So, Michael, so this basically is just kind of an example of what kind of money is needed in the building, but not necessarily what we think is required. So, yeah, I think we do need some time to think about it and make those recommendations. The other thing I would ask is there a way that we can have somebody from, say, Public Works take these items that are listed and maybe have a more clearer explanation of what they would cover, at least the ones that have been identified, you know, like the electrical. It says no work anticipated for lighting, no work anticipating interior or exterior for lighting. So that seems a little bit odd, you know. So, but there's a lot of electrical stuff in here that you know, there's the equipment connections, panels, receptacles and switches, lighting controls. Oh, that says it says no work anticipated, but then there's a dollar amount.
Yeah, that was confusing to me too.
So, yeah, just if there was a way to make that a clearer picture to us of what Stantec is, you know, what does that mean, you know?
Yeah.
What panels and, you
In
know,
layman's
what equipment,
terms.
you know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, in more layman's terms.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, because there's definitely a lot of things in there that money could be better spent on. The acid wash. There's one thing that I do know is needed is pointing repairs to the mortar in certain places, but I think those are things that can still be addressed later on. I would focus more on the interior needs. Is it possible we might, I don't know, go over there and check it out, maybe a couple of us or something? And
Yeah, and perhaps.
I mean, I'm very familiar with the building, but maybe some of the other people on the committee maybe might be interested in going there and.
Sure.
And
Well-
perhaps at the next meeting, we could have somebody from Public Works here to kind of talk about and elaborate on the different items.
And could be awesome if, I guess, I look at this as a Christmas list, perhaps, and to get at least these Class 3 ballpark figures for these tasks. But I guess not all of them have to be done this year. So for instance, if we wanted to put in a sprinkler system, it'd be nice to get an estimate of what they think that costs, but perhaps that's not necessary during this phase. There's also the idea of handicap accessibility improvements perhaps, and utilizing the elevator that's in there. Is that a cost that can be estimated?
Yeah.
And I don't think ADA is even addressed in here, or, well, site access, but.
It's addressed under contingencies.
Oh, see,
Where's that?
where's
Mary?
contingencies?
It says
What page?
under unallowable costs, it says unless the work is needed to make the building safely accessible, ADA. So
I'm sorry, where are you reading that?
the
CIP?
the
Yeah.
page on the back of the color page.
So that's not,
Yeah, that's page
that's just
6.
an allowable cost.
It's, yeah, ADA is
grant.
allowable.
So maybe
that's-
just to clarify for the committee, with page 58 is Stantec's recommendations after they did the assessment of the historic water filtration plant, the improvements needed to preserve the building. That's on page 58. Page 59 is what staff put together for the city council for the proposed capital improvement plan and a cost estimate. And then page 60 is the grant guidelines and what types of costs are eligible for the grant and what types are not. And so this, Susan put in the packet just so you could see that overview, that certain things are eligible to seek state funding for, and certain things are not. So it's not recommendations for improvements, it's just the grant guidelines.
I see. One thing that bothered me when I went into the building and looked at it was the way it just plunges down. I mean, you walk in and then it just, like, there's to that second layer where they cleaned up the water. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just kind of goes down. It seems so unsafe to me, you know. I wonder if there was something they could do to just make it safer.
There's a railing around those ponds, or whatever they're called, settling tanks. Filtration pits. So,
I mean, ultimately, you can make modifications, but then you're changing the historical significance and the purpose of the building.
Okay, that was just something that bothered me when I went in there.
I have some ideas on that because it has been mentioned by people, you know. Not everybody is going to be fearful of that, but some people see something like that and maybe become a little bit fearful. So the railing is about so high, and I think there's 2 tiers to it. So perhaps there could be a netting or something around the bottom portion, you know, in case a little kid was in there or something, or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
Something unobtrusive like that, maybe not a permanent thing, but maybe just even a strong netting of some kind. you know,
Okay,
on the inside.
Yeah.
perhaps, that
Right,
didn't
that would work.
detract from the
yeah,
rating.
that would work.
I've got a kind of a question for Michael, if he, I don't know, I doubt if you have the answer, but just going back to page 58, we've got a couple of things like demolition of mechanical and plumbing systems and demolition of the electrical systems. My only concern is, are some of the plumbing stuff that's like down in the basement, that, all the pumps and the feeds and, the huge water lines coming in, are they talking about demolishing that type of stuff, and some of the electrical panels, that they use to control the motors and the pumps and everything? I mean, that's part of I would think part of the history of the
I think so
building.
too.
I mean, is that what they're, I understand if you don't know the answer. Is that what they're talking about for the demolition of that type of stuff, or are they just talking about demolition of the old bathroom because it needs to be redone?
Yeah, certainly at the unit cost of $5,700, that wouldn't nearly cover that type of demolition. I know that's not the intent. It's to preserve the equipment and the history of the facility as the water filtration
Yeah,
plant.
well, I just, noticed, that, we're looking at, $8,000-9,000 of demolition of electric and plumbing, but that whole building, everything inside that building is electric and plumbing. So that just kind of where it raises the question in my head. I mean, what are they talking about demolition? What are they talking about for demolition? I just would like a little bit better clarification on just a general plumbing demolition and electrical demolition. I mean, especially we're trying to look at preserving the building, so people can see what it was and what its purpose was. So that'd be my only thing, a little clarification on that. Maybe Public Works, if they can come next meeting, maybe answer that question a little bit or give us a little better guidelines. I mean, so we can feel a little bit better about it. I like the whole idea of getting a grant and going forward and doing some really good things with this building, but I think we need to these numbers are all over here. Shift a little here, and just get the most bang for our buck, and also maybe, explanation of, price of windows plus the historic premium. What is the historic premium? Why are they charging extra for that? If you're replacing a window pane, are they gonna go find some old glass that they have to pay a historic premium for that? Or are they just gonna put an ordinary piece of glass in there and just jack the price up, make it look good? I mean, just a little clarification on some little things like that, just to, just make people feel a little better about spending the amount of money. Because it is a chunk of change. We're talking $500,000 on an old building that we haven't got a planned use for. So if we're going to spend that money, let's spend it wisely and get the best bang for our buck.
Yeah, one thing about this building too, talking about across America, across the United States, there's very few of these water filtration plants left in this type of building. So I don't know how many there are in the United States. That might be a good thing to research, but we do have a little gym here. So we want to keep that in mind too, that this is a very historical building, because a lot of them have been destroyed. So, we need to take care of it.
So I wanted to address, Glenn, that's what a historic structures report or plan does, as far as it identifies features of a historic building, why they're historic, what they're made of, what their condition is, and then makes recommendations on how to sensitively repair them. So in that building, they're metal casement windows. So glass is from the 1930s. That's probably not a big deal to replace glass, except if some of that glass is that safety glass that has the embedded chicken wire in it. I don't know if you've seen that. But a lot of those windows, so a lot of the glass needs to be replaced, but some of the hardware and the actual sash and mullions and they're kind of bent or screwed up. So there may be some chipped paint as well. So the recommendation in a historic structure report would identify the condition and make recommendations on how to sensitively repair them. That's why I'm hoping that the contingency or design management and contingency costs would cover a sensitive proposal for how to, as well as sensitive to repair and replace as needed, but also keep costs targeted to what's really needed.
Well, yeah, I understand that. My question, just like I say about they got to including the historic premium, I like a little bit better. I mean, I understand that it costs more to replace an old window than a new window because you've got to find a, shall we say, a craftsman to make it and stuff like that. And if that's what the historic premium is covering, that's fine. I just want to know that that's why it's there, because it's, this window, we can't, it has to have this, it has to have that, and because of that, well, we're going to put this little extra built-in contingency fund, shall we say, on that particular line item. So,
from what I recall with these types of estimates, it's like a percentage that they just tack on, the 20%, I don't know, 10% to cover those. That's the contingency, the historic preservation.
In anticipation of that. Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough. Thank you.
But I did have another question. Shoot. Oh well, it's gone.
So Michael, we would want to be coming back to the council with a list in March.
Yeah, ideally
So
with the.
by our next meeting, we would want to hash out that list at our next meeting.
Yes, so that we could
yeah.
put a cost estimate to it and incorporate it into the CIP for when the council revisits this in March.
Okay. Well then, and there's nothing to stop us just having a quick discussion about items or, to think about going forward. I just have a list of a few things here off the top of my head, but you guys may have too. So the givens here, lighting, gonna need appropriate lighting, plumbing, the bathroom, which fortunately is in pretty decent shape, and I believe it's already ADA accessible.
Yeah.
But paint, rodent control, the windows, the pits. You brought up the pits. So those pits have, a lot of material in there that's probably pretty nasty at this stage. So that would be an item that would, need to be done. It would have to be done. The spiral staircase is mentioned in here. It's also in excellent condition. It's very, very structurally super sturdy. So that basically is probably refinishing the money for that. I think it's a good thing to get that done early before, too much is going on in that building down the road. That's an item, refinishing a spiral staircase like that. That's a big project. So I would think we should try and get that tackled early on. Security, sprinkler system, and anything else you guys might think of off the top of your head that we might think about between now and the next meeting and come up with some great.
I think the ramp at the front of the building, ADA ramp needs. Mary Ann, you're not? The ADA ramp at the front of the building needs to be sure and meet code specifications, including if there's any painting or coloring of the curbs, and it looks like it's just asphalt there, but I can't really tell from the picture.
It's concrete.
It's concrete.
The actual entry itself behind the railing is concrete.
Committee members, you might just simply want to think about this after the meeting is concluded and just email Michael with any and all suggestions you might have, and then he can bring those back to you next month so that can
more
be further
information.
discussed.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. No, that's great. I just wanted to list off things that we should definitely keep in mind right up front.
So
I'm probably missing some.
well, I was curious, how does code fit into the estimation? Does that depend on the use?
Certainly the use, but then also, as we've discussed before the committee before, with the city's building code and the exemptions now that are provided for historically significant properties, that will help with the cost estimates.
So if, okay. So if we make a recommendation that we want a sprinkler system or maybe just a fire protection or fire notification system, is that just common sense that we want that in there, or is that to meet a code, or?
Yeah, this type of situation with the building, unless you're changing the use, that's usually what triggers sprinkler requirements. Use being through the building code.
Okay.
So I think, this is a good list. If you have other suggestions, let me know. I will work with Public Works and report back at the next meeting in February. And I think what will be helpful during that discussion is having the committee prioritize what are the most important improvements. Because, all of them may get cost prohibitive, and I think, Member Davenport, you had mentioned before, we want to make sure we're submitting for a competitive grant. Certainly, we will be backing this up with RDA funds, but if it is going to be a more manageable dollar amount, we're more likely to receive the grant. And so with your prioritization list, that gives us guidance to prepare the final cost estimates to present to the council.
Can we ask for RDA funds without being matched for a historic structure report? Or would you prefer to make it all one big package?
Without the report, you mean before the report is done?
To use RDA funds to conduct a historic structure report, and then that report is used to seek funds or clarify the needs. I don't want to, though, get out of the schedule, so I don't know. Maybe
yeah, I mean, it's potentially an eligible item, though it's currently unbudgeted with this fiscal year. So let me circle back with SHPO as well. A couple of the feedbacks I'd received when I presented this to the committee before is that when entities have skin in the game, when they are providing matching funds, they're more likely to receive grant. And when we can present kind of a scope of work like Stantec's overview, but not necessarily these items, but when we can present it in this detail, we're more likely to receive the grant funds because it shows that the applicant has thoughtfully identified that. But I'll also ask about the historic structures report. I think the challenge in the timing, certainly we could pursue a grant for the report, but then that would be the only thing we'd be applying for with the next cycle. And
So that would
then
keep
you'd
this
come
under
back
control.
following that with a recommendation for actual improvements.
And that's what I'm afraid of. I don't want to get out of the loop that way, so, but I don't want to just ignore that if you're presenting to the SHPO this list of what we want to do, I would think that they'd want to know, well, how are you going to meet the Secretary of Interior standards for preservation? And a historic structures report generally covers that. Maybe it's, so they have them now where they're called Historic Structures Report Light. And therefore, they're not as detailed. They don't go into all the details on the history of the building. Every single nail is not analyzed as far as their condition. It's a little more focused so that it's not as time-consuming and costly. But that's a SHPO That's what I'm just wondering, if that can be included within the 1-year package or whatever that grant is for. Is it only a single year, or can it spill over to a year and a half, or?
I'd have to confirm on that. They cycle these every year to year and a half. And then I can see if that can be combined with the grant application. But I guess with that assessment, that's going to drive what is going to be the estimate for the restoration improvements. And so we won't have that dollar figure to provide with the grant proposal.
Yeah, it's like chicken or egg, for sure. But it could be that we at least have a really good idea of what's necessary for preservation and stabilization, and therefore the historic structure report light just addresses those tasks, and not say, I don't know, whatever, the elevator or fire protection or seismic retrofits, that kind of thing. So
I will do 3 things as follow-up. One, circling back with Public Works regarding what Stantec was looking at specifically. Were they mindful of the historic structures report when they were coming up with this estimate? Because our direction to them was to look at historic preservation of the facility. I will also talk to SHPO and find out if there's the opportunity to concurrently apply for the report funds and improvement funds. And, you know, with that feedback, and along with additional input from the Public Works Department on what some of these improvements are, can give you further guidance. And at the same time, if you have additional suggestions on improvements, then we can come back with those and help with prioritization as well.
Okay.
One more question for you, Michael. So when I first was researching the grant, I don't remember there being a requirement for us to do for matching funds. Is that a requirement, or is it just going to help us to, is it always required, or?
According to SHPO, that helps with the, and SHPO, it's the commission who makes the decision. So it's not SHPO, it's the commission. It's just that in their past, when applicants have come to the table and they're looking for matching funds versus the total dollar amount, they're more likely to receive the award.
Because so when I did research it, I saw how much money that the hotel here in town got. I think it was 1.5 million over a 5-year period, and the LA Water and Power Building got something like 250,000 over a 3-year period, something like that. So I was just curious if this year, great, we're applying those matching funds, but that might not be such a popular thing a year or 2 down the road when we're ready for some more. So I'm happy to hear we don't have to have those matching funds, but maybe because we've already established a genuine effort and put skin in the game, maybe then next time we may not have to, hopefully we may not have to put up matching funds. But it's not just a blanket requirement for getting the grant money.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, that was good discussion. All right, I think we've got a plan. Michael told us, and we'll see that in our next packet.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
While Michael's still here, because he's got a little work to
Okay.
do, would you mind jumping ahead to item 9, goals and priorities?
Oh, sure.
And then we can come back to item
Okay.
7.
Okay, for possible action, update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, committee. This is our This is our monthly opportunity to discuss the committee's goals. And you have as an attachment the goals listed with updates in bold. We've discussed many of the things that are already highlighted here, so certainly I can answer any questions with the updates.
Okay, are there any questions for Michael?
And let me highlight one in particular. So goal number 7, develop an educational campaign that promotes historic Boulder City and encourages historic preservation. You'll recall that the city did receive a grant from SHPO. This is part of us being a CLG designation. Based on SHPO advice and because of our challenges with COVID, they have recommended that we postpone that camp to this fall, or I'm sorry, looking at late summer 2021. And so we would be reapplying for that grant, and SHPO has encouraged us to do that, and the money would be eligible. This camp is an opportunity for the committee and members of the community to be able to work with consultants that can talk about historic preservation objectives, education. This goes back to the goal of educating the community. And so we'd be looking to move that camp out until that time period. Hopefully by then we will be able to come and gather again.
I hope so. Okay. Any questions?
Is there any training that we need this year, or that we're due to have, whether based on our CLG?
Well, one of the things I'll be monitoring is any training that's provided by SHPO, and obviously it will continue to be virtual. Certainly, those of you that were able to participate in the national conference, that I think was a great opportunity for everybody. And then certainly this camp would be considered training as well.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for all your help. You're always so good to us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, we're looking at action item number 7. Follow-up discussion regarding activities for the historic preservation event for 2020 and discussion for the activities and award. And I wanted to say thank you so much to Ray Turner for all of his hard work on getting the YouTube done. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at any of these, and they're all excellent. And Ray is a novice. I didn't know this, but he's just learning this himself. And I was so impressed with the quality of the video, and I want to thank you for your time and effort.
Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome. And Ray and I had a Yeah, well, I know Blair is our Hollywood star. She's the feature there. That's right, yeah. Okay, well, Ray and I had a conversation, and we both agreed, and you guys pipe in, about Preservation Day coming up. And as you know, we're going to have to look at this pretty seriously this month, because we're going to have to put our information in the monthly utility mailer. But Ray and I discussed the virtual plan again, and we both felt that we should go this direction again because of COVID. And as you know, it looks like it's not letting up right now. COVID isn't. So, and we are going to be on a real tight timeline. So, and Ray mentioned too that in the next YouTube that we do for Preservation Day, maybe it should be a little bit shorter, the four ones that we chose, they were very lengthy and it took a lot of time, and he felt it was kind of ambitious, right, Ray? That maybe we should just consolidate and put it into one video that maybe highlighted 3 or 4, not quite so extensive. Is that correct?
Yes, I think maybe if we focus on the winner of the award and then maybe just some short scenes included in that, of other properties that had been considered, rather than go through a whole interview with them,
Right, yeah.
But this was a great start. I mean, I've been hoping that the committee would do things like this all along, like come up with ideas for educational stuff. And I guess now that's all in vogue, isn't it? Doing it all remotely, Zoom meetings and this and that. So it was brilliant, but it took an awful lot of hours and time to do it, which I happily did. But going forward, I think maybe we stick with Historic Preservation Day to the one program that focuses mostly on the winner.
Okay. So what about you guys? What do you think about what Ray just said?
Well, I think that's a good idea. Just have the one winner, like he says, just a little brief picture, a couple of pictures of win, place, and show. Keep it simple, keep it short. You're, like you say, doing a video, I'm sure is a tremendous amount of work to get it all edited and stuff, but, concentrate on the winner, and then just, like I say, a brief thing on, second place or third place, or however you want to do it. You're the director and producer and writer, and, all the credits go to...
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have a comment about that?
I was curious if you think we should talk to Charlie about his walking tour and make it a self-guided walking tour.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we could
Okay.
do a little video thing on that too. With the description.
Would you want to do a video of the walking tour?
Well,
Not necessarily that.
Okay.
But even a description or interview with Charlie, highlight points along the way that people could, just a short thing, rather than film the whole
Yeah.
thing. But maybe go along on the tour with him and do short little clips of various houses along the way and promote
good
the
to me.
tour.
Okay, we'll reach out.
Self-guided, yeah.
We'll
great.
see if he's up for helping with that, and
Okay.
if not, we'll just take it off the,
That's assuming
schedule.
everybody supports them.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Mary. Did you
Well,
have?
I think it's a good idea, like Ray said, to just highlight the spots and not film the whole tour. Can get quite,
Promotional video.
yeah, it can.
Okay.
And I know if you watch Outdoor Nevada, he goes to like 4 or 5 places and does the highlights, and it really captures what you want to see.
Brilliant. That all sounds great to me.
Okay. So I think we could go in that direction, and
So that's 2 items that we
Right.
will pursue, perhaps.
now,
Consider.
Could I just mention on the award day, the nominations, I think the winner would be good, but instead of ranking everybody else second, third, or fourth, or whatever, just say also nominated, instead
Okay.
of ranking them, because
Did we rank them this year?
I don't know.
No.
No.
no, we've never ranked them.
But, yeah, I think that's,
no, that's fine. Okay.
don't want to,
Just
get into
feature.
trouble for that, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So are you going to talk about the award?
Yeah,
Okay.
I kind of wanted to.
Keep them separate? Okay.
Well, yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about Ray and his efforts and then move into that. But yes, we also need to talk about when we got to get that flyer ready. It says here in the packet, the committee wishes to utilize the monthly utility mailer to promote the nomination process. The earliest such notice could be mailed would be the month of March. So we're already coming into February. So provided the flyer design listing minimum criteria, if any, is ready by February 18th. So that's just like 2 weeks away. So we need to make a decision
Well, one thing none of you have mentioned is when you want
Okay,
this,
well,
HP event to be, because
yeah. I think
whether-
you mentioned May 9th. Was that in here?
I think go for our normal date. I think it's not unreasonable, is it?
Yeah, was it the first, the first Saturday in May, or was it, or we can just talk about that some more. So when do you want to have this? It's usually in May, and do you have a specific date?
So I would suggest that we just pick the month of May as our target date, because what we're doing is something virtual and we're just posting it. And so May is, it's Historic Preservation Month. It's technically what it is. So in what we're planning for Historic Preservation Month, which is May, is one or two events, virtual events, so.
The only day you would need would be the day you're gonna present the winner of their award, so.
Right, that's right.
That'd be the only day you'd have to specify. If you can do everything else, virtual,
That's true.
videos could be on YouTube for forever, much less all of May, so. Just be the one day for the one event where you have to have coordinate people.
Yeah, so
So normally, it would be presented at the council meeting. So that could be
Did-
done virtually as well, couldn't it?
did you want to do it at a council meeting, or did you
Well-
want to do it at the person's house?
Like we did before.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I would
Yeah, well, last time we
definitely
did
wanna do that.
Okay.
So maybe
So-
late May to schedule that.
So late May, so there'll be the next council meeting after.
It doesn't
No,
need to
that
be a
doesn't
council
matter.
meeting.
So we just pick a date then,
so,
that we put it online,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
so did you want to do it at a council meeting, or you want to do it
No.
at the person's house?
No, that's fine. I think
At
we'll
the
just
person's house?
pick a
Yes.
date, we'll do it with the people
Okay,
that win the award.
okay, I thought that was kind of unique last
Yeah,
time.
we should do it.
Oh, okay,
So if we're choosing the presentation at the person's home in late May, does that give us enough time to come up with the award nominations and announcements and nominations?
That depends on how much time you want the nominations to be available to the public, because if you do want it in May, you're actually kind of
We're late in the game.
late in the game, because previously, before we knew COVID was gonna throw things out of whack, we would have started this actually in December,
Yeah.
because I believe we did that last year, so that you had the utility mailer notices going out for the months of January and February. You're already past that now.
Do we still
because-
have the information that was put in last year's? Can't we just update that?
yeah, we would have that, Susan would have it.
The
Yeah.
flyer would be easy enough to create if the committee chooses not to have any standards again. That's why I'm bringing this up. The committee has talked about in the past about if you want minimum standards listed, such as, I think the only thing in the past, it might not even have mentioned being a property in the district, but, Member Davenport's brought up whether or not, the work complies with the Secretary of Interior standards. And what was discussed previously is that if you're going to have minimum criteria, that should be mentioned in the publicity material that goes out to the public. Not that it's a requirement, but Member Davenport thought it was, thought that if there are minimum standards, that should be part of the information that goes out there. So, if, you want to have minimum standards, unless you want to come up with those tonight, then you'd be talking about that in February, and then you're bumping mailers back to April. And so that's
Yeah.
pushing
These
things
mailers have to be
really.
done by February 18th, right?
These notices have to be done, yeah, like,
So
at
that's just
least
like 2 weeks
2
away.
to 3 weeks away from the
Yeah.
first mail out of the following month.
Right.
So the flyer, so can we have both sides of the flyer?
No, I checked, the city is still having to do monthly notices about COVID and vaccinations and testing, et cetera. So no, you will not get both sides.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay,
can we though, sorry,
Go
can
ahead.
we do the front flyer as an announcement, and then for more information, people have to go online?
That's what it was last year. Well, last year you just had one side of one page anyway.
Right, but you were saying that if we wanted to add criteria for nominations and for awarding, it would have to be on the flyer, but,
Well, the flyer can state whatever you want it to state. It's just that last, for all the previous years, you didn't have any minimum standards. So, I mean, Blair, if you want to take a crack at it, I can send you last year's version and you can kind of send back what information, if you're comfortable doing that. I mean, it can't go to the rest of the committee. We can't violate open meeting law, but, the problem is, you could all email me with your suggestions, but it just may not be possible to fit all of that.
well, not
into the
everything has to be
flyer.
on the flyer. If we say that for the criteria for nominating your property, go to the website.
Right,
Yeah, I
but
think
then
that's
you
a good
need to be prepared. Then, for instance, will you be prepared to be deciding that at the February meeting next month? Because you'd want to have the information on the website by early March when those flyers are going out. You don't want people going to the website and there not being any information there.
Well, the information needs to be prepared by February 18th, which is when
The flyer needs to be prepared by February 18th for it to go out in March.
Oh,
If
got
you're
it, got
stating
it.
on the flyer, see city website for criteria, that
Got it.
means you need to be deciding at your February 24th meeting what those criteria are so that we can have it ready on the website by March 1st when people start, getting those notices mailed to them.
But that criteria was already kind of approved previously.
No, you and Charlie had come up, I think, with some suggestions.
Oh, it was
and then
recommendations
concluded
only?
that you weren't gonna do that.
Okay.
I would think that for this year, because we got a late start, like Susan said, normally this starts in December and we're already end of January. Maybe this year, just keep it simple, keep it basic. If we want to add criteria, well, we could do it for next year, and we could, it would give us time to, over the next several months, we could put together what we want to have for the criteria for the next year. But this year, because of the COVID stuff, and everything's going on, everybody's this, that, and other, just keep it real simple this year, and then we can maybe plan for something a little bit bigger next year, because we'll have a little better idea what's going on, even like just the thought of presenting it at city council, the award at city council, or, have the person there. Well, right now, we don't know if they're gonna even allow people in. I mean, that could change if they have who knows? You really can't plan anything that far in advance right now, because we have no idea they're gonna be, that no spectators allowed, or they could have a full house, or they could have every other chair filled. It's just too hard to anticipate those things. So my thought was just this year, just keep it simple.
So the criteria is kind of simple, it's just more clarifying, and.
Well, I mean, don't be added in, the Secretary of Interior minimum requirements. I mean, leave whatever was on last year's flyer or for criteria, just leave that. If we want to change the criteria, change it next year. But I'd just leave it exact same as it was for last year and the year before, and then we then know that we want to take and make some changes. Then we can take the time over the next few months to figure out, all right, what changes do we want to make? What criteria do we want these houses to have or to meet?
So like I said, the criteria isn't that much of an extra step or not a ton more of information, but I think it seems like we have a little time if we have this prepared by our February 28th meeting, and then within a couple days that it can be posted on the website.
Yeah, but the utility flyer has to be ready by the 18th, right?
So the
Susan?
utility mailer can be done.
That doesn't have to be.
That's not
yeah.
going to be changed much.
It'll be the same?
It'll be
Okay.
pretty
All
much
right.
the same.
Well, would you want me to put on the flyer, like you said, a statement that, something to the effect that minimum criteria for the award will be,
Are
you know,
located on
made
the,
available on the city website?
right, right.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that,
Is the forms there too, right? Is there a form?
the form is there.
Well, what happens is the flyer goes out to people notifying them that they can make nominations, you know, via the city website. And then once, like probably around the 1st of March or so, then we'll have our IT staff put out a link, you know, to make that nomination form live. You know, but then, you know, all the nominations come in that way, or I believe the flyer mentions if people, I mean, we had some people mail theirs in by snail mail before. You know, I believe the flyer mentions, you know, that people can do that as well. But of course, most people, you know, chose to do it online.
So is it like a 30-day deadline or?
Well, we would, I guess, if you want that's what you would need to decide now, if, you know, because we have to have the flyers final before your next meeting. So if you're wanting to present the award sometime in May, that means you need to be deciding on the winner at your April meeting. So the deadline could be even as late as basically a week to 10 days before the meeting, because staff would need time to be able to make sure that all of the nominations were in your packet for that week's meeting.
So like April 10th or something?
And I think last year we had a really good schedule of how this all flowed, I think.
And now,
As far as the flyer has to get done and the nominations and meeting our meeting schedule and council schedule.
right, and of course, I
moving.
couldn't prepare that for you this time because I had no idea if you were even intending to do this in May. I mean, last year we wound up doing it in October, so.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're in much less of the hurry issue goes away if you decide not to do this in May. It's a much more of a rush job if you're doing, you know, if you want to stick with May.
Well, I think we could leave the utility flyer like it was last year, and then update the website just shortly in March, so that the utility flyer goes out. So what date, it has to be ready by the February 18th, so what date does it actually hit the mail?
The mailers go out, and each half of the town gets it mailed around the 1st of the month, and the other half of the town gets it mailed around the 15th of the month.
Okay, so if we make that flyer very simple, and there's just put on it that it'll be they have to go to the website to see all of the actual
We'll
what's
just
required.
make sure that the information on the website, you know, includes any, if you're, but I guess you still have to tell, well,
Yeah.
the idea is that we'll say that there will be criteria on the flyer so that we can meet the February 18th deadline. And then at your February 24th meeting, you can decide exactly what those criteria are going to be.
Okay.
So that we can make sure that come the 1st of March,
I think
that's
that'll work.
listed on the website.
I think that'll work. So if we go ahead and do a simple utility flyer, and then on the meeting in late February, well, then we decide on the criteria. And Blair, you could have that ready, since that was a lot of what you wanted, right?
So let's just go down the list. So by February 18th, we will, you and I will work on the flyer.
Well, basically, I'll just add a statement about the criteria, and then I'm gonna pass it off to Lisa. But I believe last year, she pretty much formatted that flyer anyway.
Right.
So if you're wanting pretty much everything else the same, I'll just have to look over it again and to see what else will need to be changed.
Okay,
And then February 24th, the committee meets and we'll go over the nomination and award criteria that will then be handed off to Susan to go on the website.
right.
And then, and so in March, then what do we do in March?
Then, early
take the
March, we
awards.
make the voting and the information available on the website. And then the nomination deadline will need to be, like I said, about a week to, well, I don't know, I don't have my phone or exact calendar in front of me, but, given the packet deadlines.
I don't think we do anything in March. It's April meeting that we decide who wins the award.
Right, I mean, I'll certainly, it'll still remain an agenda item, so you can talk about
Sure.
the progress on videos and things like that.
Right,
And I will report to you, you know, whatever nominations we've received online by then. So we'll still be discussing this in March.
Yep.
And then what I would recommend is, since you'll be choosing the winner at your April 28th meeting, I'll probably set the nomination deadline as either the 18th or 19th
of what?
March,
of April.
April, okay.
So that way then, you know, that the deadline would be just a couple of days before the packet has to go out.
Okay, I think that's doable.
Wait. Sorry.
So that will basically leave about a month and a half for people to make nominations.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
So the awards winners are chosen at our April meeting, and then May.
That's
Is there
when
anything
the
we do in our
video-
May meeting, or no?
What did you say, Blair?
Is there anything that we do at our May meeting?
Oh, okay.
I don't
That's
think
when
so.
That all depends on how you've made progress with
Just a progress
your
review.
video for the winner and when you're gonna
Yeah.
present it. Presumably, you'll be discussing that at your April meeting when you choose the winner.
Yeah.
How fast you think you can get out there and start creating that video, for the presentation.
Got
We'll have
it.
to touch base with the nominees before and give them a heads up and let them know that if you are chosen, you know, maybe I'll have a date already in mind that I'd like to come. Oh, I'm sorry. So, so anyway, I think we'll touch base with the nominees and let them know that we'll already have a date in mind. We'll have to make that decision and then let them know to expect that on that day we'll come and interview them or do what we're gonna do.
And then Charlie too will be notified as to how we're gonna do his tour, right?
I'm tempted to speak directly into the camera to Charlie. Did you hear that, Charlie?
Okay, all right, so do you want to read back to us what we just told you? So that we have it all straight?
I've got it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And would you, if you like, I'll look at last year's flyer, see if I can modify it, and basically, obviously, here's the key difference. Last year's flyer thought we were having an actual HP day in May. So obviously, this year's flyer is gonna be more like the modified one that was sent out later in the year for Virtual Historic Preservation Month. So we'll modify it to reference Virtual Historic Preservation Month in May, award nominations for an award to be, made in May. And then I can mention something to the effect of, as for 2020, the award presentation will involve a video of the winning property will be available on the city website in May, with no specific dates.
Okay,
We can attempt something like that. And there's the possibility also, well, I'd hesitate to say that, you'd want to use the April flyer because that's cutting it a little tight.
I
But
think
there's
it
a
is, too.
possibility that, you could modify, if we still had half a page available for the April flyer. Yeah, or if you needed to update things, after the
Okay.
first went out, but then people will be literally getting, the second half of town might be getting that flyer about the same day the nominations are closing. So
yeah, I think we'll just
that
do
might-
the first one instead of doing two.
Sorry. Oh, wait, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't think, since the point of this flyer would be mostly to get the nominations, I I wouldn't know what to put in there about the video tour or what you're talking about for Charlie Hans's walking tour. Maybe is that something, do you think that would be critical for May? Or might that just be part of your ongoing public awareness campaign and you aim for doing that video a few months later? There's no reason
I
all of your
think
videos have to,
It
you
does,
know.
I don't think we have to be super specific for the flyer, and we can just say, events are in the works, something like that.
Okay, so,
And so Charlie's walking tour, I did not envision it being a video. I was just hoping to make his map available with some information, with some highlights, video highlights. So
I think it's just a promo kind of it, not necessarily the tour, but just, and like Mary said, just some couple of highlights that, you know,
I think we could meet
Right.
Charlie. That would be kind of nice, and,
quick little
you know,
1 or 2 minutes.
yeah, kind of meet him, and then he could talk about the tour a little bit.
But I
too.
think what needs to be done maybe is we'll talk to him and we'll have a decision by our February meeting if what he can do.
Yeah.
Okay,
And therefore that'll assist in what has to go on the flyer.
well, the flyer will be done
Oh,
by
by
the
the
time you
18th.
meet next month, so.
That's right, never mind. So we can find out by the 18th. Because he may not want to have his tour.
Well, mind you, that
True.
flyer has to be final by the 18th.
Right.
So if
Oh, so
you're,
it's even earlier than that.
yeah, if you're wanting, changes, which unfortunately like I said, I may be able to send you out a draft before then and you could send me back individual comments, but they can't necessarily be incorporated because
yeah.
So it's like
You know,
Friday the 12th, like the deadline?
that would be, well, actually Thursday, since
Thursday,
we're, yeah.
Okay.
So the Thursday before, and that way then we can see.
Susan will be chilling on Friday.
I'm never chilling on Friday.
Just kidding.
Okay, so then are we all then clear with the process?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, this is cool.
Okay. Is there anything else you need from us, Susan?
I'll let you know. I can always email you if there's any extra
Okay.
input or questions that I have.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay,
I have
let's
a
see.
quick question. Is it possible to go back to an agenda item,
Yeah.
to briefly go back and, because I meant to mention something to Heidi, to Heidi Swank about, the preservation plan. And, there was no mention, and I know when Heidi first came to speak to us, I don't know about the rest of you all, but I know that I specifically went out of my way to remind her that we had done a historic preservation survey in 2000, I think it
Yeah.
was 2017.
Right, I remember.
And we had 880
Yeah,
respondents. And a lot of work went into putting that survey together and making it happen. I mean, we had to fight to get that
yep.
survey out there. And yet there's no mention of that survey at all in the preservation plan. I had asked that that be considered while coming up with the plan, that at least take a look at the survey results, because here we are, we're doing another survey. This one got 169 respondents. Now, when we did the survey in 2018, one of the council members lamented that it was a dismal response in a town of 15,000 people to get 880, which we were delighted. We thought it was a great number. But we have a historic preservation plan here that's basing a lot of things on, not necessarily that they're bad, but on 169 responses. And yet there's no mention of the previous survey or any information that might have been gathered from
Can you write
that.
that
So I
in
would just like that, entered into the
to go on record?
minutes, that I again remind the Nevada Preservation Foundation that we have a wonderful survey that we did that deserves to be included and considered in this preservation plan. So I just wanted to make a statement on that
Okay.
because I forgot to say something earlier.
Okay, so it's on the record. And then also what you could do too is, when you send in any comments that you want to Heidi, then go ahead and send that in also in the written.
I wanted to make that clear
Yeah,
in the public forum that I
Okay.
think that survey,
needs to be included in the overall decision-making.
I think that survey was incredibly important to us, and just to not even have a mention of it in there is
And it wasn't that long ago
quite
either.
interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you so much, Ray. All right, then we're going to go ahead and go on to agenda item number 8 for possible action. Discussion on proposal for articles in local publications or online videos regarding Boulder City's historic properties. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that? I know I haven't done anything right now.
I guess I just need to know if this should continue to be an agenda item, or if you just simply want to focus on virtual Historic Preservation Month
I
for
think
a
we
while.
can keep putting it in the packet. It's a gentle reminder.
I'm sorry, but, agendas shouldn't be just for reminders. You're a committee conducting business, so.
Okay.
Does anybody anticipate that you expect to move forward on this by next month's meeting? And we'll have something to present, or what do you want to do? Because we just can't have a bunch of reminder items on your agenda for you.
Yeah, okay, well, what would the committee like to do?
I would, oh, sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
I was just saying, we already have up into May already decided we got our flyer going out, we've got, Ray's we putting together a video, possibly a second video with, with Charlie. How much more do you want to do for now? Maybe at our May meeting, we can talk about some other article or something like that. But I mean, just be reminded, let's come up with some words to talk about this piece of paper. Well, we've already got a plan for next couple, 3 months, so I don't know if there's
Okay.
anything else we need to talk about on this sheet today.
I can definitely put it on the May agenda. I mean, I
Okay.
can put it on any agenda you wish. I'm just hesitant to keep regularly putting it on an agenda if nobody's going to provide any information.
Right. Well,
Well,
let's,
May we'll
to it.
still be doing stuff with the Preservation Day, so maybe not till June, then we can, maybe
Okay.
in June start planning out what we want to do for the fall or something.
did you have something to say, Mary?
I just want to echo Glenn's comments that I think the other videos seem a lot more, responsive to our needs right now than this item.
Okay, okay. So do you want to move it to the June, to the June agenda?
I would like to move it to June, but also, it's just so focused on articles in local publications rather than, well, I guess it does say, or online videos. I mean, it's, what we're trying to do is what's identified in our outreach to the public. So it should be more
think-
than just
So
online.
just change
Just for
the
what-
agenda title for other methods of public outreach and bring that back in June?
Yeah, or whatever it says on our goals.
Just for what it's worth, like the local publications, basically the Boulder City Review, and last I heard, I don't quote me on these numbers or anything like that, but I heard, that it maybe gets to 2,000 people in Boulder City, whereas the flyer every couple, 3 months in the utility bill, well, that gets a heck of a lot more people. If we were to concentrate on just a reminder flyer in the utility bill, as space permits in the envelope, concentrate more on that, we'll get to more people than we would if we're trying to get a little article in the Boulder City Review. And what other publications, are there that gets to everybody, you know, that, or gets to a large portion of the community. If we want community, we want to reach as many people in the community as we can, I mean, then we need to come up, find someplace, an avenue that gets to more people, and that would be the
Utility flyer.
utility flyer, which gets to more people than any article in the newspaper will, because even if 2,000 people get that, well, maybe half of them read that article. Maybe only 25%, so now you're only getting to 500 people.
Yeah.
So just a thought.
Okay, so would you like it moved to June, or do you want to eliminate it altogether?
Yes, June would be great, but I would also suggest calling it discussion of committee outreach, public outreach, utilizing local publications, city website, social media.
Okay, that would fit in that category.
Because you're right, the newspaper has its membership or readership, I should say, but there's social media too that I don't think we're utilizing, and I think there's a lot of.
Yeah, social media is good, but you probably get to more people via social media than you do in the newspaper now.
Right,
So.
right.
Great. I'll put that on the draft June agenda for you, so you'll see it back then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And let me just say that I think outreach means that there will be information from the ad hoc committee meeting, perhaps some highlights from the ad hoc committee, highlights from our meeting today or any of our meetings. It doesn't have to be, an event or a long drawn-out article. It could be just highlights.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, moving on for possible action, discussion and update on the status of properties in the historic district. Any discussion? Okay, moving on then. For possible action, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings.
I'm sorry, can we go back to, that previous agenda? I missed this environmental assessment specialist.
What number is it?
10.
Oh, okay.
Item number 10 on page
Yeah.
73. Is the city responding?
Basically, they're just notifying us. It's for basically a cell tower out in the
Yeah.
Lake Mead National Recreation Area. We have no reason to respond, but since they apparently were, I'm sure we're technically well beyond their area of potential effect, but I think they were covering their bases by sending it to us. So we were simply passing that on to you, and if you want us to pass any comments back to them, we can.
Okay.
But no, the city would have no comment on that otherwise.
Yeah. I think visually it doesn't affect the city or any of our historic resources, so. Okay, thanks, sorry.
No problem.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we're now on 11, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings.
I think through the progress of tonight's meeting, we've already added
We've already done all the discussion.
quite a few things already put on for our agenda. I'm sure Susan's gonna have her hands full just getting us ready for next month, so.
Okay, all right.
Well, I
Then-
think, so there should be an update on the Northwind report, perhaps.
You want that as an agenda item?
No, it's, well,
Certainly, if it's ready,
yeah.
Michael always, gives to me agenda items, as they come along for you.
And then Nevada Preservation Foundation report, perhaps.
Okay,
And then Historic Preservation Day and
Oh, of course, yeah, the
the
usual.
usual, yeah.
Is Michael going to bring back any information on the Stan Tech report at the next meeting?
Yeah, that will be.
Part of
since-
that.
Yeah, since he said he was gonna bring stuff back to you, we will definitely follow up with that. So basically, looking at the current agenda, next month, obviously, if we've, I'm sorry, it's been a long meeting, so I'm trying to remember. It sounded like we'll probably have something possibly ready next month from the Nevada Preservation Foundation, unless it was gonna be the month after that, I don't recall. But if it is ready, it'll be on your agenda. And again, if we've got any more word back from SHPO on the Northwind, report and or rather the ARA forms, we'll put that back on your agenda. Monthly, we'll have the update from the ad hoc committee. If there's any new information Michael has from SHPO, or I believe the idea was that maybe by next month, we might have Public Works to talk to you about the historic water filtration plan, so we'll see if that's ready to come back to you then. Then HP Day and Award, and then the rest of the standard ones, goals and priorities, status of properties, et cetera. And, yeah, so that will cover both Northwind and NPF, provided both of those are, we've got something to bring back to you next month.
Okay, very good. All right, we're going to move into public comment again. Oh, okay, good. So you can call in at 702-589-9629. And according to the code here, we have up to 5 minutes to take any kind of comments. Okay, hearing no comments, then we will consider this meeting adjourned. And I want to thank Susan and Michael again for all their hard work and for keeping us up to date on all the actions that's taking place in Boulder City. Thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned. Welcome. You're welcome. Okay.